Today in Flex in the City, we talk to Pips Bunce, Director of Investments Banking Technology, Credit Suisse. She brings a colorful perspective of positivity and authenticity to financial services. All that happening right now in Flex and the City.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Flex in the City. I have to say, I'm really excited today because I am interviewing the wonderful, enigmatic Pips Bunce. Pips Bunce, for those of you who don't know, is the Director of and Head of Investment Banking Technology Engineering Strategic Programs at Credit Suisse. Needs a long business card for that one, Pips. And she is also the culture carrier across the financial services industry and beyond, and a formidable member of the LGBTQ plus community. A big welcome to you and thank you for joining us on Flex in the City, Pips.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's an absolute pleasure and an honour to be here. I'm very much looking forward to chatting with your good self.
Absolutely. So love to hear a little bit about your story, hear, where you grew up, a little bit about your story and how you came to be doing the job that you're doing.
Okay, where shall I start? Well, I guess I've always sort of been in sort of out the Essex, Suffolk way. So I grew up in some sort of little towns out sort of Frinton and Colchester and Clacton, out that way. I think from a work perspective, even before work, I'd always been very interested in, interesting but complex technical challenges. So I was always drawn to technical side of things and IT and, trying to solve problems. So I guess, I always liked that aspect. I think as a natural part of that, I was then drawn, as once I finished school and university and degree, to firms that could give me an opportunity to really sort of embrace those complex systems and challenges that come with that. So, I started at British Telecom Research. I went through Bank of England and UBS and Executive Director at Goldman Sachs, and now at Credit Suisse, where I've been for a good 15 years or so, because I think that natural progression of those types of firms, and there was others on the way as well, they really did give me, a nice platform and the ability to embrace the bits of, technicality and IT and problem solving, which really, really interested me. I think, along the way, I've certainly picked up a lot more things that interest me as much, if not far more, that complement that work as well. But I think that's where my background and why I've come into this industry, where that route and journey has taken me.
Fantastic. And you're obviously a key member of the LGBTQ plus community. For our listeners, are you able to say a little bit about your story about when you actually came out? Pips?
No, absolutely. I'm definitely a proud member of the LGBT community. I think from a personal perspective, I always knew I was different from a very young age, and that was probably 4 or 5 years old. I'd like and I'd know what I had, but I'd also be asking my parents for different clothes and different toys. And I knew even from that incredibly young age, I was perhaps different to some of my other friends around me. Family and friends, have always been incredibly supportive and loving, and I've had the ability to, find out who I am and what I need and different forms of expression. I think from an identity perspective, just to clear that up, I'm gender fluid and non-binary. So what does that mean? Gender fluid, I don't know how I'm going to express on a given day until I wake up. Some days I'll wake up and I want to express more male, other days more masculine, more feminine, other days indifferent. And again, I don't buy into gender stereotyping for genders. I just use that to explain to people that my expression to the outside world changes. From a identity perspective, I'm non-binary, so I absolutely do not identify purely as male or purely as female. I'm a mixture of, somewhere in between. So both of those things, non-binary and gender fluid, part of the wider trans spectrum of identities. But I guess from a work perspective, that in itself involves then having to come out in the workplace and making sure that you feel that you're in a safe space, making sure that you feel included, making sure that you are okay taking that step to come out authentically, because that's such a big thing. And I think in terms of being a culture carrier, I'm very proud of the work that we've done at Credit Suisse to create a very open and inclusive space that is, everyone can be and is able to be their true authentic self. We've got over 6,000 active and engaged LGBT plus allies. And, allies really do make the difference in the workplace. They're the people that create and foster that environment where people will feel safe and supported to come out as their authentic self. I guess, beyond that, I definitely do a lot of work outside as well of CS. I'm ambassador for Stonewall, outstanding diversity role models, Trans in the City, P3, Jures, UN, and I'm incredibly proud of that work because I see the difference that it makes in the workplace, not just the financial services, but also across other sectors as well, because I think everyone knows, right, that a much more, diverse environment, whether it's sexuality or gender identity or ethnicity or neurodiverse, any form of difference creates such a more open and diverse different set of perspectives for that company. So very proud of the culture that we're creating. And outside of that, I also, speaking in Parliament, working with the Government Equalities Office and a lot of external firms, about, yes, the work we're doing at Credit Suisse to foster this environment, but also just, educating other groups, other people about the different identities, the challenges, the nuances of those different identities, and how people can step up to create that authentic and inclusive environment, because it makes such a difference.
I'm curious. Thank you for sharing what you're doing at Credit Suisse. How do you think that inclusion agenda really impacts the sustainable performance of Credit Suisse or any other organization that embraces that?
That's a good question. I think it has a massive impact. I think, even at Credit Suisse, we've done all sorts of equity research and looking at different portfolios of LGBT inclusive companies as an example, and just cross-comparing how they perform to companies that are not as engaged in this type of work. And, you see time and time again that the firms that really focus on different forms of inclusion, again, in this case, LGBT inclusion, far outperform and are doing much better. Why is that? Because, no one wants to work in a firm where everyone looks exactly the same. Having diverse mindsets, having different opinions, having different forms of people is such a powerful thing, right? It's bringing together different ways of thinking, and those groups are much better to work in, and the companies as a result are much more effective and productive and profitable as well. So I think firms have really for quite some time, thankfully, really latched onto the importance that creating an inclusive culture and different forms of diversity is not just about making things nicer for staff. It's also much better for the firm, for the brand, for the franchise, for what they stand in, and the impact that all has.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you've mentioned profitability because that's important, and I love the fact that sustainable performance can create that profitability. So as you know, Flex in the City is all about leadership. I'd love to know, has there been a leader either outside of financial services or inside of financial services that's really inspired you, Pips?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that have given me inspiration. And I think, when you're in a place where you're perhaps different type of people, and especially if you haven't come out and, you draw on that inspiration even more. You draw source and inspiration from what other people have done. I think a few people that would spring to mind, and I think, I'm honored to say that all of these 3 people or whatever I'm going to say are very good friends of mine as well. I think one, I would say Lord Michael Cashman. He is amazing in terms of what he stands for. He's one of the co-founders of Stonewall. He's done so much in Parliament and European Parliament, and he's made such a difference to so many different communities across the world. But what I love about Michael as well is he is so accessible, he's approachable, he's humble, he will step up and make a difference. He's there. He's not someone that's so many stratospheres away from you. And I'm just, impressed by his manner, his mindset, and all that he's achieved. I think closer to home in the financial services sector, I guess a couple of people, again, that I find incredibly lovely, great friends, but also inspiring. Julia Hoggett, she used to head up large parts of the FCA. She's now CEO and over at the London Stock Exchange. Again, what Julia does, what she stands for, she'll stand with you, for you, by you, and make such a difference that inspires me. But it also, gives people the confidence to come out and be their authentic self. And I think another good example, Jim Fitterling, CEO of Dow Jones, someone else that I have a lot of respect for because what they've achieved in their, professional capacity, but also the fact that they've stood by the power of authenticity, the power of being your true authentic self, and how that has really made them a much better leader because of the ethics they stand by.
Fantastic. And so what motivates you as a leader? What are your own core values, Pips? What gets you out of bed every single morning?
Well, it's definitely not the cold mornings and the icy starts. I'm definitely struggling with those. I think what really motivates me, what's my core values, I think one of the biggest things that drives me is just the ability to make a positive difference, the ability to help influence other people, to make things better for people, to, whether that's from a leadership perspective or the teams that you're working with, or whether it's, people peripheral to you. I've lost several friends through suicide, and they took their lives because they felt they'd never be accepted for who and what they are. And, I want to create a world where all of the corporate workplaces, whether it's financial services or whatever, is open, is inclusive, and people can be their true authentic self. I don't want people to feel that taking your life is a better option than being true to yourself. So I think for me, making the positive difference to others is so important. I think using our platform, using our voice to make that difference and to help other people is really, really important. I think valuing the different perspectives from those around you, that's so rich in terms of what it gives you. Really appreciating the different forms of diversity can bring and how that makes the transactional world of finance particularly so much better. I think, for me, they are some of the key things that really drive me to be a better leader, to stand by my ethics, and at least put those things of leading with empathy and compassion and humility and sincerity, those things that really mean a lot to me. I think when you correlate and put them into practice in how you run projects, how you run initiatives and streams and whatever, makes a big difference, not only to the successful outcome of the work that you're doing, but also the impact you have on those that you're working with and around you. People respect a true, authentic leader that will listen to them, gives everyone a voice, gives everyone a seat at the table.
Absolutely. And so if I was to give you the power of a beautiful magic wand and you could wave it and change something in financial services overnight, what might that be?
Oh, where do I start? No, that's a really good question. I think, funny enough, some of the things I would say have begun. We are starting, if you look at now compared to 5-10 years back, the much better focus on forms of difference and the fact that we are, slightly different. And yes, we're all the same, but uniquely different. And the fact that financial services are now catching on to the fact that diversity pays, diversity is a good thing, it should be encouraged across all forms of diversity. I think I'd definitely like to see more progress on that thing. I'd like to see, I see some sectors, I see some firms doing much better, some firms doing much more than other firms. I guess my magic wand would be to try and bring every single sector and firm up the ladder, to try and make sure that every single firm are not doing it as a tick box exercise, that are not pink washing or green washing or whatever theme you want to look at, but they're doing it because they genuinely believe and they genuinely stand by the difference that this makes. And I think, in doing so, all those firms would work more together as a collective to help drive the positive change in the workplace, in the sector, but also across society. So I think speeding that up, right? I think, love will always win over hate, and I think firms working together to make that difference makes a big, is so much better.
Absolutely. I wonder if you could help some of our listeners, Pips. We use the words diversity and inclusion, and I know we went on a webinar quite recently and you gave a beautiful answer. So I'd love if you could give that beautiful answer and explain, in your opinion, what the difference is between diversity and inclusion.
One of the examples I love is, diversity is being invited to a party, and inclusion is then being invited to dance. It is being part of the group, but then also being involved to participate and to talk and to be included in the discussions and feel that you're in a safe space so that you can talk about lived experiences and the things that need to change. I think it's all about creating that safe space. It's about fostering a sense where everyone feels they belong, irrespective of their form of difference, right? Whether it's their ethnicity or sexuality or gender identity or, mental health or whatever. Everyone needs to feel that they are being invited into the workplace and that they will have a seat and a voice as part of that. That's the inclusion part. I think, you can't foster inclusion of people unless you have the diversity of people to be there. And I think once you've got diversity and inclusion, you then can create a sense of belonging. You can then work on the culture where people feel they are part of the conversation, they are part of the company, and they are respected for whatever they might be, however different their form may take. I think there's a very big stark difference, but they are so closely intermingled. And then when you start looking at intersectionality and intersections between different forms of diversity, that also is such an important and key thing that quite often can easily be overlooked by some firms.
Absolutely. So I've got a question. We obviously work with a lot of leaders, and we have a lot of leaders who come and they speak to us, and they want to become an inclusive leader, but they say, "Oh, I'm a little bit afraid of tripping up or saying the wrong thing." Or what advice would you give those leaders that are a bit fearful, Pips?
That's a really valid point, and definitely something I really think is important to talk to. I think it's much better to have those conversations. It's much better to engage in those dialogues and start understanding the landscape and the different forms of diversity as an example. It's much better to do that than just to worry and step away from the conversation and not be part of the solution. And, yes, it can be scary because different forms of diversity are, as you say, often a minefield in terms of inclusive language and things that you can and should say, and no one knows all of this stuff. So for me, I would always say it's better to engage in the conversation in a well-meaning manner. And, if you get things wrong, whether it's someone's pronouns or identities or whatever, it's better to do that, apologize, move on, and learn from that experience, because you will then be engaging in that conversation and part of the solution. I think that's the main thing. A good example.
Positively intentional and clunky than do nothing at all.
Exactly. And there's a very clear, and I think it's very easy to see, right? If someone's saying things that are wrong with the intent to cause upset or offense, you can very clearly tell the difference between that versus someone that has made a genuine mistake, but that mistake was coming from a good place because they wanted to talk to you. Because I very much believe in learning from other people's lived experiences. What have they had to deal with? What's their journey been? How have they been supported? What difference has diversity made to them? How have firms given them the ability to, step up as leaders? So I think if you stepped away from all of those conversations, you would shut down so much of your empathy, humility, and ability to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about younger people now. You have two children, a 21-year-old and a 24-year-old. Wow, they grow up quickly, don't they?
They sure do. They sure do.
So, question, do your kids understand what you do at work? Do they have a clue what you do at work?
They do, actually. I mean, I think with my, a lot of my day-to-day stuff and the technical programs and all that, so, they have an idea of what my job involves and, some of the meetings I do and the sort of stuff that I drive. So I think they do from that perspective. I think more so they're on the culture carrier side. They have probably more visibility into that because they are just so proud of the changes that we're driving, the difference that we're making. And I think the younger generation in particular, the levels of acceptance and importance and focus put on this type of thing is just ramping up and up more and more as you get, to newer generations. And the younger workforce just expect and demand, rightly so much better from firms that they want to work for. So I think that, the kids definitely, they know a lot of the stuff I do. They definitely know a lot of the culture champion and diversity side because, it's something they care much about. They've always been the best allies ever. And I think, they know the importance of this stuff.
Absolutely. No, it's true. The young people certainly do. And they can help educate us, which is wonderful. So what advice would you give to a young person who's maybe starting in financial services? What would be your advice to them about their career and how they show up?
How they show, that's such an important thing, and that's very well put. I think my main bit of advice, and I think it would be advice to my younger self as well, is, always make sure you show up as your true, authentic self. Do not put a facade on what you think the firm or the company is looking for, because, you being authentic, you standing by your ethics and what you believe in and what you are, that is so important. That's so powerful. So I would say to them, be proud, take pride in who you are, in what you are, and never shy, never hide your true light, because I think people interviewing you can see through that. It has a huge impact on how you come across and how you form relationships. So always be your true authentic self. Try and get a good feel for what that company's ethics are. What do they stand for? And a lot of this, you won't get from the sort of the PR stuff from the firm. You need to look at what they're pushing out on social media and what causes they've stood by, and really get to grips with what the company you're looking into stands by, and how does that cross compare with your own ethics? Is that, are they the key things that you care about and want to make a difference towards? So, it's a two-way thing, but I would say definitely put a lot of focus on understanding where you're going, who you're speaking with, are they right with what you believe in? And, I love the fact that the younger generation honestly have so much more vision as to what they get from companies. I mean, taking LGBT as an example, most of the millennials and universities we work with, over 20% of them identify as LGBTQI. So 1 in 5, much higher prevalence.
Okay.
12% are identifying as gender non-conforming, so trans, non-binary, gender fluid. Much higher amount of people being open and out about their authentic self. The last thing you want to do is work for a firm where you will feel you've got to push yourself into a mold that's not your true authentic self.
And so help me with this. One of the things that we want to do at Flex in the City is get younger people really interested in the industry. And we've come across a few graduates this year, and we'd ask them, are you interested in financial services? And the answer was no. Well, you've got a first-class degree in economics. Why aren't you interested in financial service? Well, it's a bit grey. Now, picture anything but grey. What does the industry need to do to attract more of this wonderful talent that's out there?
That's a good one. I think many companies, etc., particularly in financial services, need to really get out there and speak with the recruitment firms, the events, the conferences, and shine a light on the stuff that they are doing, the work that they're putting, why they're focusing on these different forms of diversity, and make a clear case to the younger, fresh pipeline of talent that they as a firm are not this stuffy, traditional, transactional firm that don't care about the environment or diversity or whatever, and make people aware that they care about these important factors. And, because I think that's often the case. There's a real stereotype of the financial services being a very conservative, old-fashioned group of people, and, you have to look like this to work there. And generally, you peel below the covers, and a lot of the key leading firms, that's not the case at all. It's just there's a real disconnect between what the company stands by and are focused and are doing versus the perception from the younger generation. And as we know, perception is reality. So it's really a case of joining those dots and making sure that the younger, fresh pipeline of talent get it, and they know that company actually do care about this stuff. They might not have been aware of it. And there's different ways they can do that, right? That can be media, it can be social media, it can be comms, it can be graduate recruitment fairs, it can be, I do a lot of work with London social economics. There's so many groups you can work with to help spread the word of the good stuff that you are doing to your pipeline of fresh talent. But we definitely need to work harder on changing that perception, because there's still
looks like we've got a PR and branding exercise to work on there.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. So you're a leader. How do you facilitate the growth of those people around you, Pips?
One of the best ways is I always work really hard to make sure that everyone has a voice and is heard, because you get different people from different, perspectives and cultures and whatever. Not everyone is that very vocal person. So it's really important to make sure you create a team or a meeting or an environment where everyone does have their voice heard, because I think we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And most people should be doing so much more listening. So making sure that all team members do have their sort of perspectives and ideas, etc., heard and taken on board. I think that's a really important thing. I think using your own platform to empower other people, that's an important thing. I think as leaders, one of the main things that we are here to do is to do just that. It's to lead, it's to give support to our team, it's to make sure that they are supported in what they are focused on and what they're doing. And, it's very easy for a lot of leaders to drop the ball on that one. So I think definitely making sure that those that you're working with irrespective of, their seniority or rank or whatever, we need to make sure that they are supported and they're part of the work that we're doing. And, listen to them, because I think it's really, really important to bring on board all of those different diverse perspectives. Because there's a lot of ways that we can do that.
Absolutely. And so when you're not working hard on the day job, and when you're not doing all of this incredible ambassador work, and when you're not with your family, is there anything else that you love to do?
Some of the other hobbies, I love my motorcycle racing or motorbike racing. So driving probably not very safe motorbikes and quite a speed junkie. I guess that's one thing. I love...
Do you have a Harley Davidson then, Pips?
I have a Yamaha R1, so it's
a Yamaha.
It's a fast one. I love it. No, I find it quite therapeutic. A lot of people would say riding a motorbike is not therapeutic. I think also composing, writing music, playing the keyboards, I absolutely love that. Yeah. But I must admit, a lot of my advocacy and activist work, that does take because it's a real passion of mine. I want to make the world a better place. I want to address those levels of suicide and the things that we're seeing. I do also put a lot of work, time and focus into that because I find that so rewarding. I love it when you get so many people reaching out, even from schools and primary schools and secondary schools, sharing with you the impact you've had to them. They're often people you wouldn't have been aware of. I think that's the most rewarding thing ever.
So what's the piece of music that you, Pips, would compose for the financial services industry? A tough one to end with there, Pips.
I really don't know. I would come up with my own composition, I think. Something upbeat, because I think I like to think that we're heading in the right direction. We've come a long way from, if you look back 5-10 years, we have made so many massive strides, particularly in terms of ethics and culture and all the things that make a big positive difference. So I'd say it's going to be something upbeat, but still with a lot of room for improvement. But how I would transform that into an actual piece or a named bit of music, I don't know. I think I'm gonna take that one away.
Together. We'll have to get a band together, shouldn't we? There you go.
Let's do that. I'll take that away and let you know, Rachel. I'll have to think about that. But it would be something positive because of the progress we're making.
Absolutely. I love the fact that it's got an upbeat melody and fun.
We need some positivity. I think, in the financial services sector particularly, I think we definitely need an injection of positivity will be much appreciated.
So Pips, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the heart of Flex in the City for being your authentic self, and to Credit Suisse for giving us this fantastic opportunity to speak to you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honour is all mine. We've been lovely chatting with you, and thank you so much for being so welcoming, Rachel. And please keep up the amazing work, because honestly, kudos and respect to you, because I know you do so much making things better for so many other people. So keep shining bright, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You just listened to Flex in the City. Catch us on our next episode.